And I've never told this story over an interview, but I swear Dillon, tears started running down his cheeks and just put his head down. Well, we're back with another good one with Clay Walker, and I'm just super excited. And thank you, Clay, for inviting us out to your beautiful home out here and letting us film here. It's a gorgeous piece of property. Man, thank you. You know, it sounds like you grew up in the country like I did. So, you know, we love city folks, but we just don't love living in the city, you know. Yeah. So we're out here in the country, and it's a good place to raise kids and, man, living the dream. Yeah, that's for sure. You and I didn't grow up too far from each other, hour and a half maybe. Because you grew up around Vidor, didn't you? That's right. Yep, Vidor and Beaumont. Kind of lived in both places about equal time. But, Vidor's a little closer to the Louisiana border, so as you know, the drinking age was younger in Louisiana when I was growing up. Really? Yeah, so we'd all go across the border and spent time in DeRidder, up there by Sugartown where you grew up, and also Lake Charles was the main place we'd go. Yeah. I spent quite a bit of time in Vidor myself. Like when I was doing construction, we did some work off of Doty Road down there. Wow, that's exactly right. Yeah, so, you know, I graduated high school from Vidor, and it was a great place to grow up. You know, good people, and my mom still lives there. You know, all my sisters and brother live right in that area too, Beaumont, Woodville, Vidor. Yeah. Same stomping grounds. That's right. So, growing up there, what kind of got you into music? Was you raised on country music, or? I mean, there was so much influence. You know, I think mainly my dad played, you know, in our house all the time, and so it's like, you know, my kids, they all played instruments, every one of them, you know, and they sing, and it's not foreign to them, you know, it's very comfortable, and so I grew up like that too, and, you know, my cousins would play and sing, and so it really was just it felt natural, you know, because you don't know any better, you know, and that's good. But George Jones, you know, is from that area, or lived there a long time, and he, you know, a lot of kids like me looked up to these great artists, you know, like Tex Ritter and George Jones, right? Janis Joplin. I mean, all these people for right there in that same area. You know, Janis Joplin and Jimmy Johnson, who was the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, were in the same homeroom class together. You know? Really? Yeah. So there's all this, you know, it's really a blue collar town, you know, blue collar area. Yeah. You know, Jefferson County, Orange County, and but we had these heroes to look up to, and it's like, hey, you know, if they can make it, maybe you can too. And then, of course, next thing you know, Mark Chestnut. And I used to go out when I was 15 years old. My dad, I wasn't legal, you know, to go in a bar. My dad would take me there. I listened to Mark sing, and man, I just was, you know, mesmerized by how good he could sing. And then, of course, Tracy Byrd, who I went to high school with at Vidor, he was a couple of years older than me. He ends up getting a record deal, and then, man, it just then somebody said, you know, a lightning never strikes three times in the same place. I said, no, it never strikes twice in the same place. And it did. We think it's going to strike a third time, and by God, it did. You know, so here we are, man. I mean, it's been a great ride. It's wild to think about that. You know, I was talking to Travis Tritt a while back about Marietta. You know, him and Mark Wheels and several other people from that area, and then you and Tracy and Mark and Janice and George are all from that Beaumont area. That's pretty incredible. It is crazy, man. And I remember when everybody was coming out of Georgia, you know, like you're talking about Travis Tritt and Alan Jackson, Mark Wells, man, I got to tell you, that dude can sing. I heard him sing last year. We did, we did my event. I have an event for multiple sclerosis, and Mark came to it, and we sat on stage together. And so it's just two acoustic guitars, and I could hear his voice real well. And I was just shaking my head like, good gracious. You know, some people just get better, you know, as they go, and he's one of them for sure. Yeah, Mark's and such a kind guy. Me and Grayson met him at CMA Fest last year and just fell in buddies with him. He's a great human. Yeah. So when did you start getting into singing, you know, professionally? Well, there was a Mexican food place in Beaumont, and
I was living in Beaumont, and so I went down and asked them if I could play for tips, so they let me do that. And then this guy, Joe Carter from Vider, his wife was in there that night while I was playing Beaumont, and she said, hey, my husband knows some people, and so he got me a gig at Jones Country, George Jones Country.
Yeah.
Nancy Jones hired me to play in the club over there. And I was 17, and, they paid me, I think, $100 or something. And so George, I sang there one week, and then I got invited back the next week, and they said, hey, George is coming in for a big show with Randy Travis. And so they came over to the club during the day. George did, Jones. And he walked in, he stood at the back of the club, and it was just me and sound check. Nobody's in the club. And I was singing, and I remember he was wearing a pair of flip-flops and cherry cloth yellow shorts and a wife beater, and you knew it was George, though, and
Yeah.
After I got done doing sound check, heck, I think I did a Make the World Go Away, and by Eddie Arnold, and did some other things. And then he came over and he said, hey, you got a good voice. He said, sounds good. He says, you're a long way, though. He says, you know it, meaning that I had a long way to go.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to promote, into, a star, if you want to call it that. But it was very encouraging. I got to take a picture with him and still have it. I'll give that to you before we leave, actually.
Oh, thank you.
So, but it was a moment, of just, it was just surreal, because here the guy is, listening to you do sound check. And I'm sure that was at Nancy's request, that he listened to me, and he did. And I got invited back, some consecutive years to open up the shows. And one of the highlights of my career was meeting this little guy named Little Jimmy Dickens.
Oh, yeah.
And he was having trouble with his throat. And I had this stuff called mouth coat, and it was a spray for your throat, because I had trouble with my throat all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gave it to him, and he used it, and he was like, man, that stuff works so good. Thank you so much, and so I opened up the club for him that night, and I never saw him again. And then after I got a record deal years later, I'm at my first country music CMA award show.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sitting in my seat, and I'm wearing my cowboy hat, and I'm sitting there, and next thing you know, I see little Jimmy Dickens coming down the aisle, going to his seat or whatever. And I hadn't seen this guy in years, and it was only one encounter.
Yeah.
And he stopped, because he had his neck fused, and he kind of turned like this, and he opened up his coat, and he pulled out that mouth coat, and he handed it to me. I went, you got to be kidding me. This guy remembered me after all those years. I mean,
that's something.
Is that crazy?
That is crazy.
I mean, that's stuff that you can't even make that up, So there's been some really cool moments in my life where I'm like, just pinch myself, and like, can't believe I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some more of those moments, some guys that you got to work with that maybe you considered heroes coming up?
Probably the greatest encounter, and I've never told this story over an interview, but I was scheduled to play this show in Statesville, North Carolina, and it was a big festival. I mean, there were probably 10, 12, 15 acts on it, and we were supposed to headline it. And so I was going down the list, and I was talking with my agent, because we that's the way we used to do it. We just go down and pick each date or accept or pass on it, and these days I don't even have to do that. My manager just does all of it, but back then I really liked doing it. And so we were going down through the list, and it came to Statesville, North Carolina, had all these acts. I mean, it was tons of acts, big acts from the 90s, and we were going to headline it. And Merle Haggard was supposed to go on right before us. And so I told my agent, I said, man, I don't want to do that, and I said, I'll do the show, but Haggard's got to close it. And so he said, man, he goes, you sure? I said, I said, hello, I'll do it. And so he called the promoter, and the promoter said, yeah, we'll do it. He goes, but I'm curious as to why Clay wants to do that. And so my agent called me back. He goes, man, he said, yeah, you could do it that way. But he wanted to know if it was because of respect for Haggard. I said, no. They said, why are you doing it? I said, I am not following Haggard. I will sound like Mickey Mouse. I said, have you ever heard this guy's voice? It's like, it's impossible. I said, people will leave if I go, or he goes on first and I go on second, but it was and so that night, well, that day, we did the show. And so Haggard goes on stage and Bonnie Owens comes up to me just before Haggard goes on the stage, and she says, hey, she goes, would you like to come up and sing a couple songs with Haggard? And I went, are you serious? She said, yeah. So Haggard starts singing, and I'm standing beside the stage, and I used the in-ears back then, but Haggard didn't. He just had a wedge. He just had these monitors like this. So I was standing beside the monitor guy's wedge.
Mm-hmm.
And Haggard started singing Ramblin' Fever. And he hits that note, that low note on, bogged down in the mud. And he says, mud, like this. And I watched the monitor start rattling across the stage. And I went, that is why I was not going to close the show. So it was respect. The respect was how good he sang. It's like, man, nobody's going to compete with this guy. And I apologize. I got a little bit of, got a sinus infection. So my
you're fine.
eyes are watering. But anyway, it was, surreal. And then he looked over at me and motioned for me to come out. And I was like, I about peed my pants, man. I was like, oh my God. Now I'm going to stand beside him, and people are going to get to hear how thin my voice is compared to his, So, that's okay. But I'm going to stand there with a legend. So I go out, and we did a couple songs. Today I Started Loving You Again. We did 3 or 4 songs, and I knew it was my time to get off stage, But the crowd, we probably had 15,000, 16,000 people there, and they were losing their ever-loving minds. It was the greatest thing because, here's a few of my fans scattered in there. Now, they were also Haggard fans, a lot of young ones, but it just made such a great mix, of people. And it was the most surreal moment of my music career ever. And so, and I'm looking at him, and he's got his cowboy hat on. I got a ball cap on, and had a Dallas Cowboy ball cap on. But anyway, he's right here, and I'm right here, just like we're like just shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
And I knew it was my time to get off the stage, but I wanted to do Sing Me Back Home because my favorite all time is him doing it live at Anaheim.
Yeah.
There is no way, if you're an entertainer, a singer, that if it doesn't raise the hair on your arms, listening to him do Sing Me Back Home live at Anaheim, if you don't raise her, you're not a real singer.
Right.
You probably don't have a pulse. Yeah. So, but I looked at him and I whispered in his ear. I said, Hag, I said, can we do Sing Me Back? And he goes, the warden. And the place goes nuts. But when it came to the second verse, I changed the words slightly. And I said, I recall last Sunday morning, a crowd from off the street stopped in. A choir from off the street stopped in to sing a few Merle Haggard songs. I didn't say old gospel songs. I said Merle Haggard songs. And I swear, Dillon, tears started running down his cheeks and just put his head down. And the crowd knew something was going on, and they started screaming in like this fever pitch. I couldn't hear myself. It was so loud.
Wow.
And he was crying. And man, it went straight into my soul. And I was like, I'll never be the same after that.
Wow.
And so I finished the song, or we finished it together. I still remember the tears ripping off the end of his nose, and it was just like, oh my God. They were happy tears, though.
Yeah.
It was like, somebody gets it. He knew that I was getting it.
Yeah.
That I understood. And then afterwards, he invited me on his bus. I stayed there for hours, and we just talked and sang and played, and you know. And then years later, I guess the year before he died, I was at the ACMs in I think it was in Vegas that year, and so I was talking with Dwight Yoakam, and it was packed backstage. It was like this, you know, and Garth was, I mean, like all the celebrities were back there and stuff, and Haggard had gotten some award in Living Legend or something, and I wasn't going to pressure him, but he was sick. He had the flu, and he was walking through that room to get outside to go to his bus, and he's like maybe 10 feet from me, and it's just, I mean, it's just, we're like packed in there like sardines and ants. And I remember as Haggard was coming through, I was talking with Dwight, and the world stopped when Haggard walked through the room.
Yeah.
And he was walking, profiling, you know, going in front of me like this, and he just stopped. And I was standing there, and I was just looking. I was like, God, I hope he didn't sick or something. Like, but he just turned and looked at me, and he just took his hand, tipped his hat like that to me, and walked on. I was like, oh my God, he never forgot, you know.
Yeah.
So it's moments like that really get down in you, like you're, man, I was meant to do this. And, you know, it's deeper than just respect. I don't even know what you'd call the word, but it's all those things, the admiration, the respect, the love, you know, for the great ones like him that really planted a cornerstone for all of the country music artists.
Right.
I mean,
yeah,
you know, Haggard was, you know, as big as Elvis in country music, you know, and so was Johnny Cash. But what those guys did foundationally for us, you know, there would be no Jelly Roll, there'd be no Clay Walker, there'd be no George Strait. I mean, honestly, those iconic figures carved it out and said, here it is.
Yeah. That's an incredible story. I read another story from an interview you'd done where you talked about opening in those early days, opening for Johnny Paycheck, and Paycheck taking a picture with you, and you said that you always remembered that.
So at that same place at Jones Country Music Park at George Jones's place, I was opening for Paycheck, and his bus was out back, and, you know, I just had my truck, you know, so we would all share a dressing room. But it's so cool when I say this, that, and I've seen this for years out of the iconic guys like Paycheck and different ones. If there was no dressing room, if there was no bus for the opening act, a lot of times those artists would just leave that dressing room for that local opener.
Mm-hmm.
And man, you know, the difference in the summer of being in your truck in Beaumont, Texas, and let me tell you something, it gets freaking hot.
Oh, yeah.
So I would have had to sit in my truck and wait for the show, but I got to use the dressing room. And anyway, Johnny Paycheck's bus was out back, and man, I wanted a picture with him so bad. And so I went and knocked on the door, and his tour manager stepped down off the bus, and I said, man, I hate to bother him. I said, man, it's not every day, you know, I'm going to get to see Johnny Paycheck. Is there any way I can get a picture with him? We're going to open the show for y'all tonight. He goes, he's sleeping, but let me check. Hang on a second. Johnny Paycheck stepped off the bus in his pajamas and took a picture with me and my sister, Kristen.
Wow.
And man, God, I mean, now these, you know, when I see fans, you know, that want my autograph, I never refuse it.
Yeah.
It is like, and then, you know, because I learned by that how to treat people.
Yeah.
And I mean, I grew up knowing how to treat people, but when you see, you know, celebrities, and I see some of them, and it's aggravating when I see ones that have an attitude, or don't want to sign, or they're just, I'm like, why are you doing this? Why are you even in this business? You know, that's not the norm, by the way, but I'm just saying, when I do see it, I'm like, man, you got a lot to learn. It's about them.
Right.
It's about the people that
Well,
are asking you for the autograph. They're living the songs that you're singing about, you know?
yeah. Well, the reason I brought that up is because I lived that firsthand with you. That's what I was before the camera started rolling for you who were watching and listening. I was trying to pull up a picture on my phone from my Facebook page from about 12 years ago or 13 years ago. And it's of me and you and my granny and my mom and a couple other people at Joe's Crab Shack in Houston.
Oh my gosh, that used to be my snowball ground, man. I used to eat there all the time. Wow, why didn't you tell me that? I didn't even know.
Well, we had stopped in there. I had an uncle who was at MD Anderson, and we were going to visit him, and we stopped there to eat. And my granny, she said, you were wearing I think a baseball cap. You didn't have a cowboy hat on. She said, I think that's Clay Walker over there. You were right there at the table next to us. And so we looked, and you didn't have the cowboy hat on or anything. I was like, it looks like Clay Walker, but I'm not 100% sure it is. And my granny was like, no, that's Clay Walker. I know what Clay Walker is.
Well, good old granny.
And granny, she got your attention, and we all took a picture there, and she was so excited about that. But yeah, you were gracious enough in the Joe's Crab Shack to get a picture with us, so we appreciate that.
You know, I'm glad you just reminded me of that too. You remember, I lost my dad at MD Anderson, but I love hearing the name Joe's Crab Shack, you know, because it brings back memories to me. Because if I was out of town and I was flying into the airport, you know, in Houston, Joe's Crab Shack was my stopping place. I mean, I went there and I'd wait in line, you know, to get in there if I had to. But it's you just made me smile, man. Is your granny still living or no?
No, she passed away back in 2017, unfortunately. But I mean, she knew it was you. You and Alan Jackson, I think, were her crushes. So she was like, no, that's Clay Walker, I tell you.
Well, I'm glad that we could bring a smile to her face, and hopefully she's up there looking at us right now saying, man, look at this. Here's Dillon and Clay. Right
I know she is. She's probably, her mind is blown. She was a huge fan of yours, but thank you for that, because that definitely made her day, and man, I appreciate that.
Oh man, that makes me feel good. I love people, you know, and I realize that, you know, the more my career goes on, is that I really love people.
Yeah.
You know, like being with them, like being around them, like doing shows and bringing up a smile or some laughter. And you know, it's wild to look into an audience, you know, and see, you know, teenagers and younger people in their 20s and then older people all the way up to whatever, you know, 90, 100. You know, I'll sit in the audience, I'm like, I wonder how many genres are you know, can say that.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that happens at other shows too, like George Strait or whatever. You know, they got these, but I look and I'll do "What's It to You." You know, a song that's 30 years old. I'll look out there and I'll go, I know this song is older than you, but you know every single word to it. You know, and I mean, and they're singing it like it's a brand new single. You know, that's out on the radio right now, and so there's so much joy that comes to me as well, and it's, you know, I could never picture myself not doing it. You know, people go, do you think you'll ever retire this? I go, it's not something that I've got a benchmark on, or, you know, or a tent peg going, you know, when I get that age, it's just, I don't feel that. It's just, why would you want to get away from something that brings and gives that much joy, you know?
Right. Well, as someone, we're from the same area, I got to ask you, you know, I know that it was James Stroud, right, that kind of heard you for the first time down there, and you got a record deal. What was it like coming from our area, and then all of a sudden you're a country music superstar?
Whew, man, that's a loaded question. I was playing in Beaumont at this club called the Neon Armadillo, and it was right next to a strip club called the Foxy Lady. So we were out there in a pretty seedy part of town, But I had this just I had a feeling. I'd been praying a lot, through my whole life. I've prayed, but
Yeah.
when I was in high school, I don't know if my mom or somebody gave me this book called A Day Runner. It was a schedule keeper, and you write down your objectives for the day, whatever is going to get done, stuff like that. And I was a writer in high school. Like, I loved to write,
Yeah.
compose, songs or lyrics or poems. I always loved literature, wasn't real bright, not a genius of any kind like that or a great student, but I loved to write. And so I had this thing called a day runner, and it ran your schedule for the day. And I wrote down on it, and this is when I was 17. I graduated when I was 17.
Hmm.
And I wrote down what my objective was. My objective was to become a singer that was signed to a major record label. And my goal was to have it done by the time I was 22 years old. And I put the date in there, and then I wrote down the things I would do to get there. And I wrote down write and sing original music, get a steady club gig where people would have a location they could find you in,
Mm-hmm.
and have a good band, buy some PA gear. So I wrote down all these things. And so I accomplished the things that it took to become it. And then this man from Louisiana walked in one night named Nolan Simmons. I'd never seen him before, but he walked up to me and he goes, my name's Nolan Simmons. And he said, I know some people, and I'm going to send them here to check you out. And I mean, you get told that kind of things a few times in your career, and you're like, okay, whatever, But lo and behold, 2 weeks later, in comes James Stroud, record label, A&R people, to listen to me. And I'm like, oh my. I almost choked. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Like, I was scared. I was a little scared. And I was looking at my band going, guys, just don't mess this up, And so they're here they are, and there's like 7 or 8 of them. I mean, it's the entire label, they're there.
Wow.
And James Stroud is producing Clint Black, Charlie Daniels, Little Texas, Kenny Rogers. I mean, you name it. He is the hottest producer in Nashville at that time.
Yeah.
And I'm just going, oh my God. So I started singing, and I did some original songs. And after I sang 5 or 6 songs, they all started leaving. The label did. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, we failed. It's done. I cannot believe that. I was like, was it that bad? We did not have a sound man. I ran sound, set it up, and then we went and did the show,
Yeah.
Anyway, I stopped the set, jumped off the stage, and started chasing them out the door. And by the time I got out the door, James Stroud was in his car. They had a driver, and he's in the back seat. And he hadn't shut the car door yet. And I stuck my head down. I said, Mr. Stroud, I said, I'm so sorry. We did those original songs, and I said we were going to do, a lot of blah, 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 whatever. He looked at me, and he goes, no, we heard what we needed. He goes, you're great. He says, we're going to start recording an album in 2 weeks. I'll see you in Nashville. He shut the door and drove off.
Wow.
God almighty, here we go. So went to Nashville and recorded that first album, mostly songs that I had written.
Wow. How cool is that? Well, I think you said you prayed a lot. I mean, you were obviously on the path you were meant to be on, and God put him there for you. That is incredible.
Yeah. I've always lived a very blessed life. I mean, and the way that you know that is, the older I get, the more I understand what grace is. It's not something you can earn, and as a Christian, I strongly believe that you can't earn your way to heaven, work your way there. You can't, it's by God's grace, and it's poured into empty hands, and I grew up very poor, very loved, but I grew up very, very poor. Um, and I'm not extremely talented. I work extremely hard, at my craft. But everything that I have done in my life has really come from just scratching it out of the dirt really hard, really digging in and working for it. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Nothing ever really came easy for me. Still doesn't. I still work at it, and so the blessed part is I know that I haven't deserved all these things that have happened to me. In a great way. Like there are plenty of singers, more talented, plenty of writers. I mean, and that's what I tell my children too. I'm like, look, you're going to run into this your whole life, but who wants it the most? Who is going to dig in and go, I want this?
Right.
And I tell my kids all the time, you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything you want.
Yeah, that's true, man. So you get in your career and everything. Your first 4 albums, right, were platinum, all certified platinum. I mean, on fire.
Yep.
And you come into the late 90s, and I know that you were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
How was that handled?
I've always looked at it like I've got all these blessings that have come to me, and I'm thankful for them.
Yeah.
How could I change my attitude when I am dealt this devastating blow of getting diagnosed with multiple sclerosis? And it's still the same answer. I don't. Maybe that's a blessing too, And man, it's a tough thing to say because there are moments that it is very tough, and only people with MS, with multiple sclerosis, know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brutal sometimes, and that's as plain as I can say it. And you just you find out if you have grit, you find out what you're made of. But then I turn around and I've lost friends, best friends, from pancreatic cancer, liver cancer, just cancer, getting killed, and I go, who am I to complain? I mean, it's, it is a daily struggle to live with multiple sclerosis, and that's for every person who has it. And if you complained about the pain or complained about the difficulty, it would be 24/7 because that's where it is. It's even when you're sleeping. So it's tough, but look, there's a lot of people that look up to me and say, if Clay can make it, I can too.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
I don't slow down and let it tackle me. I just keep pushing, and I'm going, we're going to find a cure for it. So, I know that answer is pretty raw, saying it like that, but it's man, God let me have it for a reason. He didn't give it to me, but he's not curing it, and he's not taking it away. So that means it must be something good for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you truly an inspiration, not only to people who have MS, but to everybody. You like you said, you've lived through it. You've continued to be successful with it, and you've also put in a lot of work towards research and a lot of money, and helped raise money for it through your foundation and everything, which is just incredible. You want to tell us a little bit about the foundation?
Sure. I don't ask the question to God, why do I have MS?
Mm-hmm.
But I do ask the question, what do you want me to do with it?
Yeah.
And I think that's the proper attitude towards it. And, just 2 days ago, well, let me back up. About a year ago, I get this call from a friend of mine, and he's older. He's in his 70s, and so is his wife, and she has MS. But they met a kid that was 18 years old, a senior high school football player in Texas, and they said this kid just got diagnosed with MS, and his family is devastated. Would you talk to them? I said, "Oh my God, absolutely!" And so I developed this relationship with the son and with his dad. And I mean, I'm on the phone with him. I've talked to them a dozen times.
Yeah.
And it's been the encouragement saying, "Man, you're in the best place possible right now. I wish that I would have been diagnosed right now rather than 30 years ago because, right now it's a pretty good spot to be in. They got some pretty good medications.
Yeah.
They can help newly diagnosed people, but the emotional devastation, this kid was going to college, going to play college football, and gets this diagnosis. And, you want to talk about how God works. Now he's going to go play football for Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, and he's going to play football there, and he's going to be treated there. So,
Wow.
which is, one of the best MS facilities in the world.
Yeah.
And he was being recruited by them, and then gets diagnosed with MS. So
Wow.
it's, and so I said, just hang on to that. But Earl Campbell, who's one of the greatest, running backs of all time, maybe the greatest running back of all time, Earl Campbell's son, Tyler Campbell, was diagnosed with MS too, and he was playing college football. And so I reached out to Tyler, and I said, "Hey, man," I said, "would you talk to this kid out of, And he goes, "Are you kidding me? I'd jump at that chance." So I connected all three of us. So that's what's happened with my foundation, the Clay Walker Foundation, and what we're doing with what we're doing for MS, and is what I have learned over these 30 years is that the best way you can help someone is help them get moving, because that's what MS does. It arrests your body, takes it over, and keeps you from moving.
Yeah.
So physical therapy is a must for every person that has MS.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to provide those services and also prove what it does. Insurance will only pay for a certain amount of sessions. So then you're just on your own. So the foundation is trying to close that gap.
Yeah.
Right now, that's our objective.
Yeah. That is incredible. Well, I feel like there's a big elephant in the room that we hadn't talked about yet that we got to talk about, is that you're going to be playing Randy Travis.
Everyone keeps asking me, "Are you going to do the naked scene?" Why is that? How do they even know there's going to be in the movie? I guess it has to be, right? But I'm like, I think so. I'm losing 20 pounds, and I'm gonna get on one of these weight loss drugs. Randy's always been skinny, with gut and shape and all that. But man, I'm excited to do it. I really am. He's he's, to me, there's a number of singers. You got to put Haggard in there. You got to put Jones in there. But Randy Travis is like the epitome. I can't say that he's better than Haggard, but I've got to say that he took what Haggard gave us, that foundational piece, and what George Jones gave us, and man, he blended that knowledge into his talent, in his singing. And to me, I think Randy Travis is the best country music singer who's ever lived because of those foundational pieces that were put in there. We all tried to achieve them. He just did it better. And but to have the opportunity to add to his legacy, and that's what my objective is, in doing the movie, is, it's not about self-serving. It's really, could somebody do it better than me? No way. No way. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that I've lived that life.
Right.
So it's not really going to be acting for me. It's going to be feeling the emotions of where you are in those scenes, whether it's on a bus, dressing room, hotel room, on stage, living life, that's hard or difficult. So for me, the emotion is going to be there, and the emotion will be carrying whatever words are there on the script. But it's not intimidating to me because of the reality of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Thanks to Zach, I got to sit down with Randy and Mary and
I saw that.
Kyle, and I rarely get nervous for anything. I didn't tell Zach this, but there's a gas station not far from Kyle's house, and I pulled in that gas station because I was way early, and I sat there for a while, and I was praying. I was praying for that it would go well, and I was praying that I was giving thanks for sure. But
it makes you feel better, Dillon. I still get nervous around Randy, okay? I mean, I still do, and he's still the boss. Let me tell you what, he might not be able to speak real good because of the stroke, but that man ain't missing nothing. I mean, it is. He is 100% on, okay? Yeah. And like, I have to laugh and pinch myself sometimes when I'm sitting beside him. I'm like, this is freaking weird, in a great way. But he's the king.
Yeah, it's like you talking about being in the same room as Haggard and Jones and Paycheck. When Randy's in the room, he brightens the whole room. He's such a positive guy and happy, and he just brightens. I think you can see Randy Travis, and he'd brighten your day on the worst of all days. And he's such a good
man. Those blue eyes, those baby blues. You're so right about that. And he's another person that I look at and go, how am I going to complain about multiple sclerosis? I can still sing. I can still get on stage, and do this. And Randy Travis could have just thrown in the towel. No, sir. That dude is full bore. I mean, he is going after it right now like he's a new artist. I mean, I'm sitting there going, I cannot keep up with this guy on social media, meaning I can't do as much as he's doing. Also, he's incredible, man. I'm like, I'm not going to try to outpace this guy. Just let him have it. And one of the things I do look forward to is following the movie. It only seems natural that there should be some kind of tour set up. I hope that's what happens, and I hope that things go great, for it, and that we get to tour together, because that would be a dream come true for me, is to be able to go out, every night on stage, for a year or two, and have Randy Travis right there. And dude, that I think people would lose their ever loving minds, because I've seen them do it at my shows. Randy will he's come out to a handful of my shows, and he'll be off to the side, but people start looking, and going, is that Randy Travis? And then if he comes out there, it looks like the Beatles came back from the dead, or Elvis Presley came back from. I mean, it's so loud, it's ear splitting. When he comes out on stage, it's a moment.
Yeah. Well, I got to ask you, because you said a little while ago that you didn't want to follow Merle because of Merle, that deep, deep voice. You're going to be playing Randy, who probably got a little bit deeper voice than even Merle did. Yeah. So how's that? Are you going to be performing the music for the?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we don't know exactly how the music's going to go. I'm sure it'll be a combination of things. Meaning the originals that Randy recorded, and then probably some songs with me singing. But my voice has deepened a lot, in my older age, and I love that. I haven't lost the top range yet. Hopefully I don't. But it's a really good question. When I do Randy Travis songs, I'm probably a half a step up normally from where he is, because he does have a deep voice, more baritone, than most singers. But I have the ability to sing those and do, put it this way, I can do them justice. Never going to sing them as good as Randy.
Yeah,
obviously.
Well, I'm super excited. I know everybody's super excited to see it. Do you know when production's going to start, or?
I think the film is scheduled to start sometime in late summer, early fall.
Oh, really?
Is what they're talking about right now, and and they're shooting for, a spring release next year. I mean, that may be too optimistic, but and the director and producer of this film are guys that get it done. I mean, that
Yeah.
they don't dilly dally around, and there's some really wonderful elements that are happening right now that I can't really speak to, but
Yeah.
it has such great traction, in that industry, in the film industry. There's a lot of excitement and a lot of people who want to see it happen, and a lot of people who want to financially participate in it, which is very good and for all things. And
Right.
we've also seen, once we made the announcement that the movie was going to be made, I mean, the fans went crazy, so we know that there is a very, there's a big contingency of people out there that have a big appetite for it. And, you know, it, obviously somebody like me, I've always, I'm not always, but I've started wondering from before we started saying we're going to announce this. I was wondering how people were going to how people would perceive me being in it, and that has been all positive. I've seen no negative stuff about it. So I'm like, man, people are glad to see me and Randy come together. And, and there will also be other people, playing Randy. There'll be a kid, in his childhood. And then, then there'll be somebody in their 20s, that's playing Randy when he first got started and in his heyday. I said, well, why not use me for the 20s? I mean, not. I can work out. We can do some CGI.
You put on your Nashville Palace apron.
There it is. Yeah.
No, I think everybody's excited. I was there at the Opry that night.
I remember you being there.
Yeah, when it was announced, and I was sitting out in the crowd when you guys announced it on stage, and man, the crowd went wild, and I could hear people talking around me. Man, this is going to be great. This is going to be so cool, So I think a lot of people are just really excited about it.
Well, I'm ready to get started, and get it going. And I really trust the director. He and I've had a lot of conversations, and, I have no, intentions of going into a movie career, and it that kind of came and went, early in my career, me thinking that kind of way, but I'm not even remotely interested in an acting career. But this piece right here it's a legacy, for Randy, and could be for me too as well, but really, man, my heart is, what can I do to contribute, to this for Randy? And and I think the rest will fall in place if that's the attitude I take,
Yeah. Well, you were kind of the driving force behind it. Didn't you meet the director on an airplane and kind of pitched it?
Yeah, it was an idea of mine for years. I was just thinking, they made a movie about Johnny Cash. George Strait was in Pure Country. I'm thinking, why is there no movie about Randy Travis, who was arguably the most iconic figure in the 90s, period.
Yeah.
I mean, he was bigger than Garth, bigger than George. The 90s, Randy owned the 90s. And I don't think any of us, would have had the careers we had it not been for what he did. I mean, he was a worldwide sensation, a publicity sensation. He was everywhere. And so I was on a plane with this guy, and I just started talking to him about what he did for a living. And he said, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm a singer." He goes, "Really?" So what's your name? Was Clay Walker, and he was like, "I would have never guessed that." He goes, "My family and I have listened to your music and blah, blah, blah." So we just got to talking, and I said, "Have you ever thought about doing a biopic, a movie like they did on Cash or whatever?" And he was like, "No, not really." He said, do you want to do one on you? And I go, "No." I said, "No." I was thinking, Randy Travis, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, Randy Travis is phenomenal." So I took the idea, and I didn't know Randy and Mary that well, but I took the idea to them, and they were like, and I passed it around. And so, people were not it for anything great, I've noticed this, it takes a while.
Yeah.
So anybody out there who's watching this right now, you cannot rush greatness. It doesn't happen like that.
Yeah.
Always, always, always happens slowly. Always.
Yeah.
And with the Randy idea, it floated around, and then I reached back out to them, a year or two later, and they came to a concert, and we had some conversation, and they were like, yeah. Then a year later, I got with the same publicity agent as Randy, Zach Farnham, and it's crazy because I started running the idea by Zach, and Zach was like, you know what, let me social. I said, Zach, I've heard this SH for so long. I said, can we just get an answer? Does anybody want to do this? We got a director waiting that thinks this could be really great.
Yeah.
So we put all of the principals in a room for dinner. And we brought in the heavyweights. We brought the director, the producer, Randy, Mary, me, Zach, my manager, Randy's manager. Everybody's in a room, and we're having dinner. And so the director says, to the table, because it seems like we got everybody on board for wanting to make a movie. Do we think Clay ought to play Randy? And I had this gulp in my throat. This is like, man, he's just throwing it out there. And Mary and Randy said, well, we're not doing it without him doing it. So, it was like, they had already talked about it, I guess.
Yeah, it's an endorsement.
So Randy and Mary picked me to do it. And look, all I wanted to do was make it happen.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make it happen. And I didn't make it happen. I just started the ball rolling, and man, here it is. And it takes a village, man. And this is a big village behind this. And I think Randy's going to get what he deserves, I feel.
Yeah.
And I think the fans are going to be elated, because there's a lot of ideas floating around about how to roll the movie out. It is made for theater, so it'll be, a national release, in theaters. But I there's going to be some very, very special moments and events around the release of the movie. And there's talk about a 10-city tour, with Randy.
Yeah.
Being there and maybe doing these releases, maybe do 10 cities and rent Bridgestone Arena and have a full-blown concert, and then play the movie, or vice versa, play the movie, then do the concert, but literally making this, giving it everything that it deserves, because honestly, the biggest fan base for this is going to be country music fans.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But I see it being enormous, and I want to see that huge smile. Well, he always has a smile, but I want to see Randy blushing. I want him to be that happy.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. Well, that's just one iron in Clay Walker's fire. What else do you have going on or coming up?
Making new music is always exciting, and I've been pretty slow in that category the last few years, and there's a reason for that. It's I only want to make music that sounds iconic now. And those songs are so hard to write, and because they don't just fall out of the sky, and they're hard to find when other people write them,
Yeah.
So I'm being more selective than I've ever been about the songs I'm recording and how I'm going to record them. But I'm getting ready to go in the studio. We found 4 or 5 songs, and I'm going to go, and I've written a bunch, and we're going to go in the studio with Keith Stegall, who's Alan Jackson's producer since inception. And then Keith has produced some big songs with me as well. So, and he lives right across the street from me. So we have a really great friendship, and really he understands what I want to do, and that is, I think every entertainer tries to like chase what's popular at the moment. They do. And then someone will say, no, I don't do that. Yeah, they do. And I've been guilty of that. But this music that I'm about to make is just the stuff that fans actually expect from me.
Yeah.
So there won't be surprises. It's going to be, oh my gosh, I've been waiting on that.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've seen enough on social media of people saying that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely paying attention. And guess what? I get it. And I want to give them exactly what they want and deserve.
Yeah. Well, with guys, like Zach Top and Jake Worthington and Belle France, people like that who are bringing back the traditional sound and the sound of the 90s. And
I love all those guys. And by the way, those guys aren't BSing when they say, we love 90s country. When I hear Zach Top, he even dresses 90s. He even wears the same MWZZ Wranglers that I wore coming out, in my first few years. And so I'm like, this really is. A lot of artists, and I'm not going to name any names, for the past 5 or so years, have been saying, man, we're 90s sound. I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. But these guys you just named, they are. I mean, they're for real, man. And I'm like, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's exciting to hear that you're coming out with some music that's going to bring your sound to the forefront, because everybody's hungry for it. And I'm excited.
And they deserve it. And that's what I think, radio and the industry has really, talk about a swing and a miss. It's been a huge one. They have totally ignored that faction, which is the majority.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll dance to hip hop. They'll do some things with, big production. It's just fun to hear at concerts and stuff like that. But when they get in their trucks, what they're really listening to is Keith Whitley, George Strait, Clay Walker, Randy Trav. If you really want to know, that's what they're listening to. They're not turning the radio on anymore.
Absolutely,
they're really listening.
To
that.
Streaming services have put a big hurting on the radio. That's for sure. That's right. We can listen to what we want to listen to, and it is Clay Walker, George Jones, Paycheck. But where can people go to, keep up with tours you have coming up and that new music coming out? Where can people keep up with that?
So we're going to do a good job of letting people know, mainly on social media, what's going on with the recordings and, when it comes out, and to stream it and to listen to it. We'll do that at concerts as well. But all of the platforms, we're on all of them. We're on TikTok and Instagram and
killing it on all of them. I see you all the time on collaborating with people, and
man, people ask me about it, and I know there's a lot of negativity about social media, or can it rot your brain? Yes, and just hating on AI and hating on this and that. I'm like, man, look. It's how you use it, and that's everything. You can use a vehicle to do a lot of damage, or you can use it for what it's meant to be used for. That's to get you back and forth to work or to church or get groceries, whatever. Look at social media the same way. It's a vehicle, and how do I want to drive it? Do I want to break all the rules or break the speed limit, or do I want to respect it and be respectful, to fans? And that's the route I want to take. But I love it. But to answer your question, all of our stuff will be out there in the normal way that people find it. And I enjoy the relationship with fans through social media. It encourages me, and it also directs me, and if I get enough stuff going one way, I'm like, I need to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Because fans are real, and every now and then you get the rude one, but I just kind of smile and, go right on by that one. But for the most part, man, fans are telling you what they want and what they expect and how much they love you.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I appreciate you again for inviting us out here and letting us do this at your place. Beautiful place. And it's been a pleasure just to talk to you and hear a little bit of your history and your stories. And we're definitely going to have to, do it again.
Well, Dillon, I've been watching your show, and especially since I knew we were going to get to sit down together. And man, I'm just impressed, that you
appreciate
you
that.
bring a light to people, in music, and you've interviewed a lot of great people, and you also commented on a lot of great stuff, people that you didn't even get a chance to interview, but I really enjoy the content a lot. And who's the guy from Louisiana? Joe Rogan likes him. He's here in Nashville. Podcaster. Theo Vaughn.
Theo.
Yeah. I mean, I'm expecting to see your numbers get on up there. He's a Louisiana boy. I think he's from Covington. I think he went to the same high school as my wife. So it's pretty interesting. Covington, Louisiana.
Yeah, he's a cool guy, and I appreciate those kind words. I grew up just like you did down there, and just loved country music. I tell my podcast week was tired of hearing this, but when I was 3 years old, I asked for a Sony Walkman and Johnny Paycheck's Greatest Hits.
Come on.
3 years old, and wore that thing out, so I've loved country music my whole life. And so I'd just be reading Waylon's book or something and be like, people need to know this story. I get online and tell it, and next thing I know, I have hundreds of thousands of followers, and I'm able to come up here and sit with people who I've listened to my whole life and capture these stories. It's been a huge blessing.
Well, there's a story I heard, growing up in Vidor. So I used to live across the street from the house that George Jones and Shirley lived in.
Oh, wow.
And I think she was his first wife. And some of the stories are very true, and I know that for a fact.
Then
that was the house that he drove the car through the living room because she was cheating on him with this guy.
I don't think I've ever heard the story.
Well, the story I wanted you to check out was, I know that one's true, actually. And George drove around in the station wagon with a coffin in the back of it, saying he was going to kill that guy. And he actually shot him when he was running out the window. He shot him and he hit him in the foot. This is a true story. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up. This did happen, right? And but the part I wanted you to check out was this Paycheck story. Paycheck played, I think, either bass or guitar for George Jones.
Yeah, I think he did both.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he also sang harmonies for George. And two stories I heard, and I don't know if either one of them are true, but it sounds like it could be. One of them is that when George was having a tough time vocally, if he had a tough time that particular night, Paycheck would take the lead on certain parts of the song, and Jones would take the harmony, and people would think that Paycheck's voice was George's, right?
Yeah.
And the second story I heard is that Jones got his style, the style from Paycheck. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that when Paycheck was on his deathbed, that George made it a point to go by the hospital and spend time with him in there just before he died, So a lot of respect regardless.
It's so weird that you bring that up, because I was with Gary Gentry yesterday, who wrote The Ride in 1959 and Drinking and Driving for Paycheck. He wrote all this. The one I loved back then for George.
Oh, man.
He wrote all those. And I was
Corvette song.
Yeah. I was with him yesterday, and I actually said that yesterday. I said, if you listen to the old Paycheck stuff, you can tell that I think both him and George kind of stole a little bit from each other, or not really stole, but influenced each other, because you can hear things that George was picking up from Johnny, and Johnny was picking up from George in those times, and they kind of blended. But man, what singers!
I tell you what, it's hard for me to get through Old Violin. I mean, it's that's just iconic.
Yeah.
And I think he wrote that.
Yeah,
didn't he? I think he wrote Old Violin.
Yep.
Man, I could talk all day about this kind of stuff, and we should do another show where we actually go through music together.
Yeah.
You know, and listen and talk about it. And,
Oh, that'd be a blast. I'd love to. Let's do it.
wait a minute. I'm going to start my own podcast, and I'm going to do that.
There you go. Well, I'll be the guest. And we'll do it together.
Just teasing. Go ahead.
You have a brand new single. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
Wow. Yeah, it's called Cowboys in Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it with some guys that really great writers. One of them, Jaron Boyer, fantastic songwriter. I'm writing with him tomorrow, actually. It's a deeply personal song for me. You know, I never have been a songwriter that wrote as a job, or I'm going to come in and I'm going to write every day. And, you know, it's always been an inspired process for me. And I really won't pick up the guitar and write unless I feel something inspired. You know, and whether that's a melody or a lyric or whatever, but it always comes from inspiration. So it's and some guys do it great just doing it as a 9 to 5, you know.
Yeah.
And I like writing with those guys too, because it actually can the craft is learned. The craft is learned. You have to learn it to be good at it. But the inspired piece of it is what people feel. You know, so Cowboys in Heaven was an inspired song. And, you know, at least from my part in writing it, it was based on this old man that I loved like a dad. His name was Charlie Rizzo, and he was a PRCA cowboy, and he's in the Texas Rodeo Hall of Fame. He was a great person. And Charlie and I, our relationship came through fishing, saltwater fishing.
Oh yeah.
And we spent many, many hours, you know, on the bays and on the Gulf down in Galveston, Texas. And he lived there, you know, the last 30 years of his life. And my wife and I lived there as well. So we developed this great relationship, and I have some of the saddles that he won. You know, he gave me a saddle that he won in 1966, you know, in Pasadena, Texas.
Wow.
And I had it restored, and he came out here to our place where you're at right now, and I put him on one of our horses with that saddle all restored, you know. So he's riding that saddle that he won, and that horse started bucking. And he was a bronc rider, and he started laughing. And he's 80. He's going, woohoo! I mean, this horse is bucking. And I'm like, you know, I'd never seen this horse buck before. I was like, what is going on? You know, so... And he's just bucking across the pasture and saying woohoo. And he finally got her. She finally quit bucking. And he goes, is that all you got? You know, I'm like, God almighty. If that would have happened to me, I'd have been ready to kill her. You know, it was like, but, you know, that's who he was. And you know, I was on my way from Scotland. I was in Scotland actually with my family on vacation, and we got the news. His wife had called, you know, and that he was, you know, he had COPD really bad and very rough, man. It was killing me, you know, to see him hurt so bad. And so last conversation I had with him, it was right up at the end, you know, and I was going by and visiting him, you know, almost every day, but we were on vacation, and things started progressing. And so I was on the phone with him, and I go, you know, Charlie, I said, how you feeling today? And I knew that things were getting, you know, in a way that it was, you know, it was to the end.
Yeah. And
I was hoping that we'd be able to get back home before he passed. But in that moment, you know, I said, how you feeling? He goes, man, he goes, won't you say a prayer? He goes, we'll get past this little rough spell. You know, and man, it hit me. I knew that was going to be the last conversation. But his easy way, he wouldn't cry or anything. He just, hey, you say a prayer. We're going to get through this little rough spell. What he was meaning is that we were going to be going through the rough spell.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And the last words he said, my wife was sitting beside me, and Jessica, I looked at her, And I just kind of closed my eyes, and we're in the car driving, leaving some place we were there, and so she looked at me like, "Do you think this is it?" And I just started seeing tears roll down her cheeks, and she says, "I love you, Charlie." She goes, "I love you, Charlie." We called him Charlie Boy. "I love you, Charlie Boy." And he goes, "I love you too, Jess." That's the last words he ever spoke to us, because the service went out right then where we were. But the last words I ever heard him speak was to my wife, and it was a really just tough thing, because my wife was pregnant, and we ended up losing the baby like 2 or 3 days later. It might have been that same moment, I don't know, but it was. And my son said later on, he goes, he says, Charlie Boy was the first one to see the baby, and so it was so many emotions wrapped up in it. And then right after that, my brother-in-law, 39 years old, ends up dying unexpectedly. And so we have all this stuff happening at the same time. And Cowboys in Heaven was being finished. I actually was sending Cowboys in Heaven to Charlie that day that he was dying. So there's so much to it. And so seeing the song come out right now and being able to know why and how it was written is it's a very, very special thing for me, and a lot of emotion tied into it.
Yeah, man, that's a lot of emotion definitely wrapped up in that story. But definitely go stream that one and download it for all of you who are listening. And man, that's Charlie Boy sounds like a pretty incredible guy riding a bucking horse at 80 years old.
Charlie Boy was the man's man, and he was small in stature as far as his size goes. But I want to tell you something, man. His body wasn't big enough to hold his heart. I'd only compare him to like Secretariat or somebody, but the joy that he brought, and the calm and peace that he brought around anybody who was near him all the time. He was one of the most beloved people, and had the most cunning wit. I mean, he could cut you up in pieces and you wouldn't even know it. And all of a sudden you realize, you go, I think you just put me down. It's like, he was that funny, man. And just always joyful, and he knew exactly where to press, exactly when to relax and ease up. And, I admire him to this day. I have a picture of him in my closet. I have a walk-in closet. So I've got a picture of him in his cowboy hat, tipping his cowboy hat like this. And so every morning that I get dressed, I say hello to him, and it's a man, such a great feeling being able to see that big smile of his, but just to know that we shared so many things in common. And when I got inducted into the, Texas Cowboy Hall of Fame, he was there with me for it. And my dad died in 2011, so Charlie really, took over that role for me. And just, it never was even spoken, that he knew how I felt about him, and I knew how he felt about me.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Clay, I just want to tell you again, thank you for doing this, and I can't wait to do it again. Go through some music with you and some of those stories.
We'll do that.
And that's going to be a lot of fun. But I just appreciate you. I appreciate your music. I appreciate you taking your time 12, 13 years ago to take a picture with me and my family, making my granny's day, and making my day today by doing this. So thank you.
Well, you're really good at what you do, and that's, bringing joy to people's lives through your show. And I'm glad that we had a great experience together. It was 12 or 13 years ago, and hopefully now, we can start a real friendship and be friends, lifelong friends.
Yes, sir.
I'd like that a lot.
100%.
I'm going to keep on watching your show, dude. I'm telling you, it's really good.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm definitely going to take you up on coming out here and going fishing, because I hadn't found any good fishing spots in downtown Nashville. believe it or not. Maybe off the Cumberland Bridge there.
Well, if you go back here, you'll be catching. You won't be fishing.
There we go.
We're going to make it happen.
There we go. Well, I appreciate you, Clay, and all y'all listening. Be sure to go check out all of his socials and keep up with that. And be looking out for this new movie coming out, new album, new music, lots of exciting stuff, tours. Be on the lookout, and we appreciate you, Clay.
Thank you, Dillon. God bless, brother.